All right, guys, we've got some more major, absolutely critical, absolutely exclusive college football realignment news. There's been some tweets, what's going on, what's happening with the Big 12, with those 4 teams possibly going, from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. We're going to talk about all of that, but we've got a headline here. Paul Finebaum, the SEC superfan, makes a bold prediction on Clemson's future and interest in the SEC. And then we've also got a bold prediction from another analyst on Notre Dame. So Paul Finebaum says, I think Clemson wants out of the ACC. I think they want in the SEC. They remind me a little bit of Oklahoma. Oklahoma had been flirting with the SEC for years. He says Dabo Swinney knows what's going on. Nobody knows Alabama outside of Alabama more than Swinney. He has ties there through many friends and associates. He can do whatever he wants and get great recruits. But he can't get as many if he's not in the SEC. He also says at some point the ACC is going to be figured out. There's no figuring out about Clemson. That would be the school that wants out of there the worst to go to the SEC, really for survival. Clemson is still Is Clemson really a super? Clemson is a weird program. They've been the second best college football program since the inception of the playoff, but are they really a superpower? Like, Clemson doesn't even have close to the fan base Texas does, Ohio State does, Michigan does. I don't know if I would classify Clemson as a superpower. Clemson wants to make sure their best days aren't in the rearview mirror. So this seems like major speculation from Finebaum on Clemson possibly leaving the SEC. I think the major motivating factor for Clemson is you would make so much more money in the SEC than the ACC. That's got to be the number one motivating factor for them if they do end up thinking about leaving, because really, Clemson can dictate to a certain degree the amount of power the ACC has, because they're by far the most powerful program in the conference. When you look at football, it's Clemson and then maybe Miami, maybe, Florida State. So they really can dictate what happens to the ACC. If they leave the ACC becomes irrelevant in football. If they stay, it's still going to be relevant, at least with Dabo Swinney there, because they have been the second best team since the playoffs started. Obviously, they had a down year last year, but still, Clemson is still getting great recruits. Top 5, top 6 classes, great recruiting averages. And then let's take a look at this Notre Dame prediction here. I think the next domino is Notre Dame, but I don't think it's going to fall. I don't think Notre Dame is going to do anything. They have had plenty of opportunities to join a conference, and they actually did join a conference 2 years ago during the pandemic year, and they enjoyed it so much that they left. I wouldn't factor that into Notre Dame's decision-making. They were really just forced to join it, I believe, due to the pandemic, if I remember that correctly. The 2020 season was horrible. I don't remember much from it, but the money's different, and I'm sure that they're going to take a look at it. Maybe they will change their mind. So this is another nothing quote. I didn't read this entire quote. I shouldn't have even included this. The dude literally says Notre Dame is not going to a conference, and then the last sentence says maybe they will go. Like, what are we doing with these quotes, man? I'm sorry, guys. He also says, I just don't see it happening because of all the reasons they have said over and over again. Of course, the difference now with USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten, the money gets even higher. So Notre Dame, as an independent, is due for a new TV deal, and they very likely will get around. This is a very liberal projection. Possibly $50 million per year. Right now, Notre Dame is making maybe $30 million per year on their current TV deal. Now, it's going to go up. But how high will it go as an independent? Will it get to $50 million? Will it get to $60 million? If you go to the Big Ten and you're Notre Dame, you're making over $100 million a year. That's a lot of money to turn down. That's even more money with USC and UCLA joining the conference. And that only incentivizes Notre Dame to also join the conference, because you could still have your coast-to-coast rivalry with USC in conference. Again, guys, Notre Dame is apparently not doing anything until at least 2025, but it does make sense for them to potentially join the conference. And then, guys, we've got major tweets. The Pac-12, which is really the Pac-10 at this point, schools are showing solidarity today. Does not mean all is well. There are still 3 schools wanting to jump to the Big 12. Those schools presumably are Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado. 3 that want to jump. 1 school is playing both sides. Presumably that school is Utah. And then 2 schools that are riding the pine for the Big 10. Those 2 schools very likely are both Oregon and Washington, hoping to get into the Big 10. They are all trying to get the most money possible out of this renegotiated deal. So this is just a theory that's been thrown around by this dude based off of his sources. I'm guessing Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado going to the Big 12. Utah, Oregon, and Washington forge ahead, thinking they are positioned for future Big 10 membership, and backfill with 3 Mountain West schools to keep 10 members in the Pac-12. Because if those 3 schools, Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, leave the Pac-12, you're left with 7 schools. This theory says they would fill it and get back up to 10 and try and keep the Pac-12 alive on life support at that point, with Utah as well as Oregon and Washington hoping they get a potential Big 10 membership. If they don't, do they also just go to the Big 12 and the Big 12 becomes a super conference? I don't know. That's all speculation. We will have to see. And then we've also got ESPN is telling the Big 12 through back channels that they would like to broker a deal to convert the Longhorn Network into a Big 12 network and secure all of the Big 12 Tier 3 rights for 7 years. There's a catch, and the catch would be the Big 12 lets Texas and Oklahoma leave a year early with no penalty aside from the exit fee. So that would presumably be Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC in 2024. Remember, the timeline currently is USC and UCLA to the Big 10 starting in the year 2024, Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC starting in 2025. They want to get it a year earlier, and their ESPN is telling the Big 12, we will give you a big TV deal for the next 7 years if you allow Texas and Oklahoma to leave from the Big 12 to the SEC a year early, with just the exit fee letting them leave. So this is all very, very interesting stuff. I think the most interesting thing out of this is the idea that Utah thinks they have a chance to get into the Big 10. I'm not saying they don't. I would be shocked if Utah did get into the Big 10. But right now it is looking like Utah, Washington, and Oregon are all holding out hope for potential Big 10 membership. How long they'll hold out hope for, I don't know. Is there a point where it becomes so apparent if Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado go to the Big 12, maybe late July, early August, it gets announced? Is there a point where Oregon, Washington, and Utah give up on the Big 10 dream and say, we just got to get into a conference legitimately, and they also join the Big 12? I don't know if that's what ends up happening. It feels like that's what's going to happen, and I don't know if I saved this or not, but there was also, I'll see if I can find it. There was also a tweet. Okay, here it is. And what's interesting as well is my Big 10 source is telling me if Notre Dame decides to join the Big 10, then Stanford is the desired partner to come with Notre Dame, and they will stop there possibly forever. This is huge news. Washington was their next choice if Stanford doesn't go with Notre Dame. It looks like it's Washington. And then Oregon was actually the 3rd choice as a potential partner with Notre Dame, which would expand the Big 10 to 18 teams. So the Big 10 reportedly wants Stanford and Notre Dame next. If Notre Dame says we're in, Stanford is coming. If Stanford doesn't come, they'll take Washington. And then it looks like Oregon would be the third choice. So if I'm Oregon, I am scrambling at this point. I am making sure I'm talking to the Big 12. I don't want to be left out of potentially both the Big 12 and the Big 10 in this scenario. So that is a very, very interesting news on, possibly a Big 10 expansion. If the Big 10 takes Notre Dame, they would want Stanford. And this is what I've speculated for the last few weeks. I've said Stanford, due to their academics, they would be coveted. They would be wanted by the Big 10. And that's exactly what it looks like is happening. So guys, major stuff. We've got Paul Feinbaum coming out and saying Clemson's going to the SEC, although that was mainly just speculation. We've got actual sources here, totally real, saying that, if the Big 10 if Notre Dame goes to the Big 10, they will take Stanford. And then the Big 12, it's looking like Utah, which was originally a rumored Big 4, going to the Big 12. Utah is trying to wait. They want to hold out hope, possibly joining the Big 10. Doesn't make much sense to me, but maybe their athletic program knows something. They think they can get in. I don't know. It seems like the Pac-12 is still a sinking ship. If you're the Pac-12, whatever you have to do, try and hold on to Oregon. Try and hold on to Washington. Those are the two schools you really have to hold. If you lose Arizona State, and Colorado, they apparently will try and keep the Pac-12 alive by adding 3 Mountain West schools, presumably Fresno State, San Diego State, and then maybe Boise State or Colorado State. That's just my speculation on the Mountain West schools they would pick. I don't know who they would pick, but it would probably be some combination of those 3 schools to get back up to 10 schools, and you would have a Pac-12 that was really 10 teams that's barely staying afloat. Basically, the only way it would be afloat was because Washington and Oregon would still be in the conference at that point. So this is the speculation we have right now, guys. We will see. This is really juicy stuff. They said it was going to slow down, but we're actually kicking it back into gear with the realignment talk. I said earlier today, I think the big story of the summer, those 3 teams, Arizona State, Colorado, are they really going to pull the trigger and announce they will be leaving for the Big 12? And then the Big 12 would be at 15 teams, so they'd have to add someone else. And who would that other team be? We thought it was Utah. We thought it was going to be Utah, but now Utah is getting cold feet, playing both sides reportedly on joining the Big 12. So we'll see who that other team will be, because you're not going to have 15 members of your conference. They would prefer, I would imagine, the Big 12 would want to get to 16 teams, just like the Big 10 and the SEC. So we will see what happens. This is all developing right now, guys. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.